Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm back with another video, and spoiler warning for this one, obviously. So, I just wanted to release a video of my first time beating the new bosses in the DLC. I've only had the time to beat the DLC maybe like 1.5 times or so far. So I don't have too many of the new items either, but I've also really enjoyed what I've seen so far. I thought I would share my thoughts on some of the new content in general. Before I get into that, I'll just mention that I will include some screenshots for my builds right after I fight the bosses, but I wasn't trying to get huge damage numbers with these builds or make the strongest build I could and play the DLC with it, because I feel like that would take away from my experience of my first playthrough. And one last thing, if you've been coming back to this channel on the regular, please do consider subscribing. But anyways, back to what you're seeing on the screen now. If you're super perceptive, you'll notice on the Sunken Witch fight, I'm using a new mutator and some new gear that I couldn't have possibly obtained on my first playthrough of the DLC. This is because my first playthrough didn't have the Sunken Witch. I immediately re-rolled my adventure mode after creating my new one, and I didn't realize that would reset and throw normal Lossum areas into the pool. My thoughts here are basically Sunken Witch sucks with Trapper. It's such a restricted area, and Trapper is so annoying for this. But to be honest, it's not the worst it's ever been. As you can see with the build I'm running, I think it's pretty interesting just with all of the different damage sources being mostly passive damage. But on the topic of new bosses, I'm a bit disappointed that they only made 3 new ones. They're always like my favorite part of Souls-like games. A lot of the value of replayability is with bosses, so I was hoping for a few more than just 3. But good bosses are always worth way more than a bunch of bad bosses, and I think Bruin and the One True King are great bosses. Especially the One True King, but Sunken Witch is alright, I guess. It's a cool concept with the small arena that gets bigger over time and everything. However, I think her moveset is really what drags her down more than anything, because she only has like 4 different moves total or something, I think. But anyways, to the DLC in general, from what I've heard and read and somewhat collected, there's a lot of new gear. So this should greatly help with build variety. At least I hope so, because beforehand I was feeling it was kind of stale when I was creating stuff, because I would always default to the same few options for different like styles of build, be it range damage, skill damage, mod damage. For example, they've been adding a bunch of new stuff to do with the Ritualist and various damage over time effects. They've also been adding a various amount of ways to play off of forcing yourself to have gray health, which seems pretty interesting. And also some rings and amulets buffing more unloved damage types, such as skill damage or mod damage. And this should just give you more variety in general. Not to mention, there's a whole bunch of new mutators coming in. A lot of them do have effects surrounding status effect damage, so I'm really sure myself and plenty of others can come up with builds with those and cook up some beautiful nonsense. But now, as you can see on the screen, I'm fighting the Blade of the King. This fight actually took me forever to do. Like, the fight itself literally lasted over 4 minutes, which is kind of brutal for a mini boss. But I sped up the footage a little bit. But the problem with my DPS laid more so, I think, in how my build matched up against him, and the fact that it was my first time fighting him, so it wasn't totally comfortable to be super aggressive, and I just was a little bit too scared or didn't want to die by doing something stupid. He can also be low-key abused when he's on the ground, just by constantly like running into him. Since his attacks don't track well, you can run in and dodge through. He'll just attack the wrong way. But overall, I think it was a pretty solid boss fight, amply challenging. Another thing in general that I really liked about this DLC was like the atmosphere. Each area felt so unique, even the overworld. Like, for example, you had a harbor, you were jumping on like wooden boats. You were trekking through old town streets, you were exploring a palace courtyard and castle walls, you were in the sewers, and that's all just in the overworld. That's not to mention the various dungeons that you can get throughout this version of Lossum. Another area that really stuck out to me, for example, was the Forgotten Commune, which is one of the dungeons, which is the place with the befouled altars. I actually got like Elden Ring nostalgia when going down the tower that Nemue is trapped in, which is extraordinary. Since Elden Ring has got to be the game I loved my first playthrough on the most, just exploring everything. The fact that this game even gave me feelings comparable to that is incredible. As for difficulty, I think the DLC is in a pretty good spot, at least on the higher end. Minus like 1 hitbox, I don't remember anything that seemed unfair. I think everything in general was challenging but just, and the one attack that kind of annoyed me a little was the beam strikes during the One True King boss. They seemed a little bit off compared to where they visually are, or maybe it was the timing or something. There's something a little bit wonky there. But overall, that's not like a huge deal at all. And another important part is that nothing felt like it was excessively tanky, and they didn't dial up like the damage to 1000 either. For example, I got like Hardy on the One True King, and that fight took me about 4 minutes too. I think it was shorter than my fight with Bruin. No area felt overrun by like too many mobs or anything either. The thing I died to the most were definitely the Dran Fiend, the green pus-filled balls of rage, and the poison after effects that they leave when they die. I definitely died so many times to just walking into a poison ball I didn't see after a Dran Fiend was already dead. In fact, after that happy thought, I'm just going to move on. Finally, to my favorite part of this DLC was the One True King. Not just in a boss fight stance, but also from like a lore standpoint, he's cool. He ties into the main game and normal awesome, and interestingly enough, really well into the Red Prince story too. His fight is super thematic, with you fighting like this enormous crazed king with a hammer that screams he's compensating for something. The phase where he summons mobs, and then if you don't kill them all in time, he sucks them, heals off them, powers up off them, is incredible. I just love the concept of you fighting like gargantuan beings regardless of the game. The only gripe I had with him was that maybe his hammer blows were a little bit too easy to dodge, like the just default smash ones, but oh well, this is basically exactly what I would want in a final boss. He's not excessively tanky, he's not a gimmick, he's super cool visually, lore-wise, thematically, what have you. I personally much prefer him over Annihilation, since Annihilation just seems out of place with regards to the rest of the game, with him summoning you to like a digital world in phase 2 and doing some really weird like glitch attacks. However, the Annihilation fight does have a really nice flow and audio cues to it, so the fight is pretty smooth. However, the other thing with Annihilation is that I think his second phase is just a little bit too tanky, especially after already having a first phase. Even if the first phase doesn't have the most HP, the second phase just feels like it alone could be a final boss. It kind of feels like they just said, we'll make it harder by making them do mandatory evades for 2 minutes, and they can fit their damage in around that time. Anyways, back to the One True King. The also great part about him is he can be fought in close range, and allows for melee attacks, allows for a lot of skills to be able to hit him, allows for shotties to be able to do good damage, etc, etc. So you can use more options the game has to their full effectiveness. Anyways, can you tell that I love this boss? But that's all from me for today. If you've made it this far in this video, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and please let me know what you thought of this different type of video in the comments down below if you have an opinion at all. And I'll hope to see you in the next one, where I'll hopefully have some Ritualist nonsense cooked up to destroy some bosses. Anyways, watch me quickly get scammed right here. Oh, come on, you're joking! Oh, that's so troll. And I'll leave you to watch the rest of this fight.